Do you know anyone who can seem to almost always point out a contingency where even the most well thought out plan could possibly fail? Or someone who almost never fails to see a dark cloud in every silver lining? You probably do. Now, you might not be that pessimistic, but I think there's maybe a little something in all of us that defaults to what could go wrong instead of focusing on what's already going right. Or that defaults to focusing on what we don't have instead of looking at what we already do. And that's in normal circumstances. What about those times when things are hard and resources are limited and you come to the inescapable conclusion, we just don't have enough? There are times, aren't there, where you can't help but looking at life, any aspect of life, even the spiritual aspect, and come to the conclusion that you need more than you have. And when you're there, that can be not only a lonely and a desolate place, it can be a desperate place. But, you know, when God looks at those same circumstances, do you know what God sees? We see scarcity. And God sees possibility and opportunity. The possibility to bless us more than we thought possible, and the opportunity to show His glory, and to, in doing that, help us to trust Him even more. Look, Jesus can do a lot with a little. And that's what we're going to see in the event in Jesus' life that we're going to look at in this conversation today. Matthew chapter 14. Listen.
Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away to go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said they need not go away. You give them something to eat. They said to him, "We have only 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children.
So there's a big problem at the end of the day. A big crowd's been with Jesus for most of the day, and now it's dinner time, except there's not a lot of food. And Uber Eats doesn't deliver out there in the desolate place, so nobody in the crowd seems to have thought that far ahead. They just wanted to get to see Jesus, and now that they're there, it seems like they're going to stay until somebody says, "Okay, healing, teaching, it's done for the day, time to get up and go home." And Jesus' disciples figure it is time for Jesus to make that announcement. Well, Jesus had a different idea. Matthew records, Jesus says, verse 16, "They need not go away." And I'm thinking the disciples are like, huh? What? Hasn't it been long enough? They do need to go away, like now. But what really, I think, made their jaws drop was what Jesus followed that up with. He followed up, "They need not go away," with, "You give them something to eat." Not, "I'll give them something to eat," but you give them something to eat. You give them something to eat? Well, they knew that they couldn't do that. I mean, not enough resources and not enough resourcefulness to find what they'd lacked. I mean, the food they had on hand wasn't enough even to feed themselves, much less a crowd of more than 5,000 people. And they didn't have any ability to make that little into something more. I mean, none of us do. And they certainly weren't enough resources out there in that desolate place, even if they had the resourcefulness to look for them. And even if they said, well, we can go buy food for people and we'll send somebody to the surrounding towns, there wasn't enough money that in their bank accounts to buy enough food for all these people. Their resources and their resourcefulness just weren't enough. And I wonder, did Jesus perhaps want them to realize that? I mean, did Jesus want them to see that there are some things that you just can't do by yourself? And then recognizing their inadequacy, to turn to Him for help, especially given what they'd already seen Him do? Perhaps. I mean, stop and think about what they'd already seen Jesus do. They'd seen Him change water into wine. They'd seen Him heal a paralyzed man, simply had a word tell him, get up and walk, and He did. They'd seen Him cast out demons and heal a blind guy and raise a dead girl, and on and on and on. Jesus did a lot of incredible and even impossible things. But, well, the trials and the tensions and the troubles of the moment, well, they often seem to blur and even sort of almost erase the memories of what happened in the past. And we easily default again to that natural tendency to see what's missing and to zero in on what we don't have, rather than recognizing what we do and who we have with us. And Jesus' disciples here are no different. And this is where Jesus is so good. Jesus doesn't let the disciples' can't-do attitude get in the way of Him doing good. So what Jesus does here is he turned and he took a little bit and He turned it into a lot. Jesus saw scarcity and He turned it into abundance. Jesus took a small boy's lunch and He turned it into a feast for more than 5,000 people. And who can do something like that? God. I mean, which reinforces the theme that's been going on since chapter 1 in Matthew's book. Jesus is God with us. I mean, if you think about it, this is a creation-type moment, just like when Jesus turned water into wine. There's not enough there to make a meal for 12, much less more than 5,000. And what does Jesus do? He takes that little bit and He makes it more and more and more, so that the 5,000 are fed and even have leftovers. And then by doing this miracle out in what Matthew describes as a desolate place, where there weren't a lot of resources, Jesus is also reminding everyone out there of of what I'll call their way back history, when God miraculously provided food, manna, in a place for hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even millions of His people, in a place, the Sinai Desert, that was even more desolate than this one. And there God did it from nothing. I mean, there was no food, and then it was there every day for 40 years. So creation, manna in the desert. Matthew wants us to be able to make those connections too, and see that Jesus is God. And not only that, Matthew also wants us to see again what sort of God, the type of God that Jesus is. Number one, Matthew shows us that Jesus is a God who cares. Jesus is a God who cares, and who cares enough to interrupt His schedule for us. Now think about what's going on there. Jesus went to this desolate place, this solitary place, this remote place, to get away from the crowds, not to interact with them. But when the crowds figured out where Jesus was going and they followed Him there, Jesus didn't turn and run away and go back further into the hills like He could have. Here's what Matthew tells us, verse 14, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them. He had compassion on them. Jesus lets the crowds interrupt him. In fact, Jesus actually initiates the contact here. Jesus changes his plans so he can help people, healing the sick and teaching them about the kingdom of God, and doing that pretty much all day. And then instead of sending them away, he lets them linger on into the evening and gives them a meal that they are never going to forget. Jesus is a God who cares. And you also see here that Jesus is a God who provides. A God who provides graciously and a God who provides abundantly. I mean, think about it. What did the people do for the meal? Like nothing. What did they provide for the feast? Pretty much, again, nothing. 5,000 people and one small boy's lunch, and all the food they had on hand was that little lunch, and yet they all ate, and they all had enough. Jesus did everything. Jesus gave, they received. That's called grace. Jesus giving freely, giving generously, giving abundantly. Abundantly here, so much that everyone ate and there were still leftovers. Before moving on this conversation, stop and think about where you've seen that before in your life, or in your church's life, or in someone else's life. Take a few minutes to stop and think about this. Where have you seen Jesus do a lot with a little? And then as you think about that, where you've seen Jesus do a lot with a little, before you hit play again, go ahead and thank God for what you've seen him do in that situation. Jesus can do a lot with a little, can't he? I mean, he certainly does here. And that shows us something else about Jesus. Not only is Jesus a God who cares and a God who provides, Jesus is also a God who surprises us. I mean, like Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 3, he can do incredibly more than we can even ask or imagine. Have you seen that? I have, both in my life and in the life of our church. I mean, I remember not having enough at several points in our launch in Concordia here in this neighborhood. Our resources and our resourcefulness just weren't getting it done. We didn't have enough, but we gave God what we had, and then God stepped in and did a miracle. And then suddenly, surprisingly, sometimes at the last moment, we had enough. See, Jesus can do a lot with a little. So it wouldn't surprise me if God does something like that again with the big debt that we're struggling with right now as a church. Wouldn't surprise me if he does something like that in the places in your life where you're lacking, where you're feeling a void, where you just don't have enough. Jesus can do a lot with a little. Sometimes there's not enough, right? But this event drives us to remember who's with us in that desolate place, and who's with us in that desolate place, and what he can do and what he has done with next to nothing, even with nothing at all. And then this story also points out some things that we can do when we're in those times in our lives, when we look at our life and all we see is scarcity. And we see that we really don't have enough. And there's this great big empty that we don't know how to fill. And our own resources and our own resourcefulness just aren't cutting it. Well, a couple of things I think that this story shows us. Number one, remember. Remember and believe. I mean, remember, Jesus can do a lot with a little. And remember that where we see scarcity, God sees both possibility and opportunity. The possibility to bless us more than we ever thought, and the opportunity to show his glory and to lead us to greater faith. Remember. I mean, that's one of the things that reading Bible's good for, and that coming to church is good for. Being reminded, oh yeah, this is our God. This is who he is. This is what he does. This is what he has done. And this is what he can do, because if he did it before, he can do it again. And as you remember, then even though you can't understand, believe and obey. Obey. I mean, look at the disciples here. All they had was 5 loaves and 2 fish. Now, they didn't see how that could feed everybody. It didn't make any sense to them. They might have been thinking, Jesus, what are you thinking? But they didn't verbalize that. They didn't say, Jesus, what are you thinking? They didn't focus on, hey, it just can't be done. Jesus told them, bring me what you got, and they did. They obeyed, even though it was beyond their ability to grasp the how. I mean, think about this. Where in your life are you challenged to do the same thing? Where can't you see the how, what God says, that it doesn't seem to make much sense to you, but you hear God saying, well, do it anyway. Do it anyway, even if it doesn't make sense. Obey, because blessing is found on the path of obedience. And then enjoy the moment when it happens. I mean, at the end of the day, even though they were out in this desolate place where there wasn't any food and there weren't a lot of resources, everybody ended up having enough. More than enough. Actually, everybody was full. And my guess is that just like the water into wine, this was probably the best picnic food that they had ever had in their lives. I mean, everyone was full to the brim. I mean, you don't go back for seconds and thirds if the food's just meh, right? I mean, Jesus knows how to give good stuff. And when he does that sort of thing for you, enjoy the moment and celebrate his blessings. And enjoy his blessings, and don't forget to thank him for those blessings too. And then, number 4, take the opportunity to give back. Now, there were 12 baskets of leftovers, right? And those baskets weren't like big buckets or anything. They were like small little baskets that people used to carry around stuff when they were traveling, sort of like we might use a backpack today. Why 12? Well, all of this is just kind of speculation here, but I'm thinking they're 12 disciples, right? So I wonder if those baskets are for their travel stuff. It kind of makes sense. But then why not pick up 13 baskets of leftovers? I mean, enough for the disciples to eat and also for Jesus. Now again, this is just pure speculation on my part. But I'm kind of thinking that perhaps Jesus is giving them an opportunity to practice generosity and to give him back for a little bit from what he'd blessed them and provided for them. You know, kind of like what we do when we give an offering at church. And then number 5, when you're in those spots, also take the opportunity to grow in faith. I mean, learn to trust Jesus more when you're in those desolate places. And you seem to be running low on resources and resourcefulness. Think about this. Where's your desolate place right now? Where's the place in your life or your church where what you have just doesn't seem to be enough? Now, I don't want to minimize how challenging it is in those sort of places and situations. I mean, we're living some of that right now, so I know. But I also know that those desolate places, Those desolate places are opportunities to grow in faith and trust. To grow in faith and trust as you learn how to get rid of pride and to rely totally and completely on God. So, if you're in a desolate place right now, here's what I think Jesus is showing you and saying to you. You are not alone. You're not alone. Jesus is saying, I'm here too. I'm here too, God with you. And even though you're not able, I am. I am. And whatever resources that you have, just give that little meager to me to bless. It's enough. It's always enough for me. I can do a lot with a little. And I might even surprise you with how much I can do with what you give me. Because I'm not only a God who can, I'm a God who cares. Now, no one likes desolate places. But Jesus is there to help us through and to provide for us what we lack and to give us the opportunity to share with others as he does how awesome he is and how wonderful life with Jesus can be. I hope you're not in one of those desolate places right now, but if you are, or the next time you find yourself in one of those scarcity spots or desolate places, and you're pretty much out of resources and resourcefulness, number one, remember. Remember that Jesus is God. Jesus is a God who cares. Jesus is a God who's with you in that desolate place, and there is absolutely nothing that Jesus cannot do. He can do a lot with a little. He requires nothing of you but just to believe that he can, and when he does, that you receive what he gives by grace. Remember that when you're in those desolate places, and then trust. Trust that Jesus is the same God today as he was back then, and he can do the same things. The same God yesterday, today, and forever. And then as you do that, adjust. Start to adjust your attitude. I mean, the pull is toward the negative. Right? The pull is toward seeing what we don't have or what we can't do. Well, adjust your attitude to focus on what you do have. And even more than that, who you have with you. You see, when you adjust your attitude that way, you might even find yourself asking in that desolate place, I wonder what God's going to do with this one. I'll do what he asks. I'll give him what I have, and let's see. And when you do that, and when you see that Jesus is with you in that desolate place, suddenly it's not quite so desolate anymore. And you might even find a little unexpected abundance.